We are taking you to a very special place in China, a town in the southwest of the country by the name of Lijiang. This is a historic town, and it's really one of the best preserved historic towns in all of China. And we're bringing you there at a very special time period, which is a flashback to 1997. In those days, Lijiang was not crowded with tourists at all, with less than 2 million annual visitors. However, now the number of visitors has skyrocketed to 80 million annual visitors. Perhaps the world's largest increase. For example, Paris gets 50 million annual visitors. New York gets 65 million annual visitors. Barcelona, the capital of over-tourism, gets 14 million. By comparison, the old town of Lijiang is tiny in area, just 4 square kilometers, or about 1.5 square miles, and yet gets 80 million visitors a year. Mostly it's domestic Chinese tourists. So keep in mind that all of the video you're watching in the program was photographed in 1997. Now it's more crowded and has been rebuilt after several major fires, and yet it's still a beautiful and historic town to visit. So we're going to take you back in time and to this wonderful enchanted land of Lijiang. Well, it's a beautiful place to see, even today, and especially back then. And it serves as a metaphor for the changes happening in the world today, the changes in travel, how every place is going through changes. So don't wait, don't hesitate. Get out and visit, travel, wherever you want to go. You should do it soon because the world is constantly getting more crowded, especially the world's most attractive tourist spots. As you see on the map, Lijiang is in a remote part of China in the southwest, in Yunnan, near Kunming, and that meant it was isolated until many flights started arriving, and nowadays the airport is very busy with jet flights coming in from all over China. When we were visiting, there was hardly any tourists. In fact, it seemed like there were no other tourists visiting at the time. As you look around at the people in the streets and in the video, you don't see anybody else with a camera. There's no tourists, really. A few perhaps, but by and large, everybody you're seeing in the movie today was local residents of Lijiang. Another big change from then until now is the nature of the buildings and the shops, especially, and the restaurants. You see, back then, the shops were really geared more for the local residents and hardly any tourist knickknacks for sale. And the restaurants were just incredibly basic. Most of the restaurants are really quite small and serving a few dishes and generally with no menu and at very low prices. You could get a meal for $1 back then. Nowadays, it's gotten modernized, and so things have changed, but it's still going to be worth visiting for you, even today. And we're going to share some tips in the program about how you can get the most out of a visit nowadays to Lijiang. The first suggestion to maximize your visit is to come in the off-season. Try come in the winter time because the climate here is really very mild year-round. In the summer, it doesn't get that hot, and in the winter, it really doesn't get very cold. So come in the off-season, most definitely, and try and come on a weekday rather than a weekend, because there are lots of Chinese visitors who will be coming in as weekend trippers, weekend visitors when they've got a few days off. So midweek in the winter, that would be best. And then when you're coming into town to visit, try come early in the morning, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and later in the afternoon. And that way you can minimize the crowds and see as much as possible to your best advantage. We had the unique opportunity to visit inside a traditional household, and that was a real eye-opener. It's a beautiful place with the old wooden structure around an open courtyard, some chili peppers hanging up to dry, And the lady of the house took us around and showed us into her rooms. We had a chance to look in the very simple living room, the bedrooms, and have a chat with her through an interpreter. So that was quite a lovely and personal visit. And then we ran into a group of little ones, all very well dressed and curious about us as we were fascinated by them. Looks like they're on their way to their kindergarten or preschool. They're doing great. One of the defining characteristics of the visual beauty of Lijiang is the streams that flow through the village. It's amazing how they have harnessed the streams. There are several streams, and they manage to divide them and channelize them and run them in little canals and channels down nearly every lane in town. And this was their main source of water. This is where they wash their clothes, they wash their foods, and it was clean water for drinking as well. So just a phenomenal system of water distribution was developed there. You'll notice there's a definite protocol on the way they position themselves when they're using the stream. The vegetables are washed upstream and the laundry is washed downstream. And they don't seem to be using any detergent, it's just rinsing the clothes out. They really want to keep the stream clean because it's used as well for cooking, and they have got no industrial pollution in the area. So the water is really quite pristine. They even cooperate and collaborate when they're washing out a mop and rinsing off a chicken. So this really does take a lot of social agreement and solidarity in the village to make it function. A system in place for centuries and still functioning today. There are numerous places in the village along the stream where you can see how they're controlling the flow, and they're splitting the stream, dividing it, sending it off into separate channels to different parts of the village. The streams of Lijiang offer endless pleasures, especially when you can walk alongside it on these open pathways and across the very quaint old stone bridges. It's sometimes been called the Venice of China, but then a lot of places around the world have been called Venice. Lijiang is a watery town, and the streams are part of its identity.
And it feels like we've stepped back in time hundreds of years. China today is a country that is being modernized very rapidly. There's only a few places left like this in China, actually, aside from your rural country villages. 70% of the population of China still lives in rural farming villages. And we've visited several of those kinds of villages in our visit here in Yunnan. And those are quite interesting to see. Dirt roads and cows and ox and donkeys walking through town, and pigs and chickens in the backyards, and people living a rural farming lifestyle as they have done for many, many centuries. The other part of China is the modern China, the big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, skyscrapers, mirrored buildings. And in those big cities, you'll find they have all but wiped out their old parts of town. On the other hand, Lijiang is one of the rare examples in China of an old-fashioned city. It's a perfectly preserved city that dates back many, many hundreds of years. 500–600 years, the city has looked very much like this. So we found a historic hideaway in the southwest part of China, and we're really enjoying it. The people here are very friendly. We'll be attending some evening shows with traditional music and traditional dance, eating some of the traditional foods. The cuisine of this region is a little different. As you find throughout China, a lot of regional variations, and it's wonderful. They love their chili peppers and their garlic and their ginger and spicy foods. They have all sorts of noodles and mushroom dishes.
Lijiang in the southwest of China in the Yunnan province is a very historic town. It's getting modernized rapidly now, however. We had the fortune to be there when we photographed this video to give you a look at how really old it was back then. And still today, it's an old historic town that's worth visiting. During this program, we're going to randomly show you the different aspects of life in Lijiang. We're going to be showing kids and old people. We'll have a look at some of the shops. We'll go look at the marketplace and the modern new town. We'll be doing some excursions out of town as well. And generally just meandering around, showing you the sights in a wonderful mix of visuals. There are some lovely excursions that you can take outside of the old town. There's a beautiful park right in the city with a wonderful lake and historic buildings and beautiful landscaping and very oriental atmosphere here. And there's some museum and historic exhibits as well. And we had a good time walking around and enjoying that scenery. In 1997, Lijiang was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is a very important recognition for this small village. As we leave the beautiful park and continue into the narrow lanes of the old town of Lijiang, we're going to share with you the reasons why UNESCO designated this place to be a historic site. UNESCO has a wonderful and detailed description of Lijiang and its importance, in which they say, Lijiang is an exceptional ancient town set in a dramatic landscape which represents the harmonious fusion of different cultural traditions to produce an urban landscape of outstanding quality. UNESCO has made a considerable effort to protect and preserve the historic quality of the old town of Lijiang. And UNESCO has had help from some partners, especially an organization called the Global Heritage Fund. And they worked on helping to save China's last living ancient town, as they put it. In their document, they say that in the heart of northern Yunnan province in southwest China, near the borders of Burma and Tibet, is one of the last surviving ancient towns in China. Lijiang ancient town has survived intact for more than 1,000 years, with over 4,000 native families living within its core and protected areas. Lijiang's Naxi people still preserve much of their native Dongba culture and deep linkage to nature. The Global Heritage Fund was responsible for restoring more than 184 traditional homes in the old town's core area, and they removed about 300 modern buildings that they found inappropriate to the historical environment, as well as preparing historic preservation guidelines for the local community, officials, and contractors to work with.
This is one of several market squares in the heart of Lijiang, and it's really a lively, bustling place. It's a fresh fruit and vegetable market, and they've got chicken and meat and eggs and everything you need for your dining table. And people here shop the old-fashioned way every day. Most of them don't have refrigerators in this small old town, and so this is part of the daily ritual. Shopping at the marketplace is particularly bustling in the morning, say between 9 o'clock and noon. It's a really active spot. So when you're in Lijiang, if you get to Lijiang, come down to the marketplace in the morning and have a look around. It's an old-fashioned historic town, perfectly preserved, one of the only ancient cities in China that's left today. China's been modernizing at such a rapid clip that they've knocked down most of their old cities. They have lots of old villages out in the countryside, but this is an actual city. One of the charms of Lijiang is simply walking around its old alleyways. The people here don't speak any English, but that's okay. You can get by with sign language. And in your hotel, if it's a nice hotel like ours, they'll speak some English at the front desk. In a few of the restaurants, you might find a waiter who speaks a word or two of English. And several of the restaurants have got menus that are in English as well as Chinese. So you can certainly get by when you're in Lijiang. And this old town is worth at least 2 days on your itinerary in China, or perhaps 3 as we're doing, and you combine that with a few excursions out into the countryside. But one of the greatest things to do in town is to come visit the local market.
It's really great fun to walk around in this old town market. from one stall to the next and check out what they're selling. Mostly it's vegetables for the local people, but there are some souvenir type tables with different knickknacks and historical kinds of items and jewelry and various kinds of artifacts to have a look at. And they don't speak much English, if any, but you can really still have some fun doing a little bit of bargaining, or at least find out the price, as we're doing now with this young lady who's going to sell us a little cat figure.
How much?
还是写给你吧。
It can get a little frustrating when you don't understand each other's language.
20. 20, okay.
But there's always pen and paper, numbers, the universal symbols.
What's it made of?
什么？
Sima. Sima?
And sign language and a little bit of bargaining.
Mao. Mao cat.
And you can get by and have some fun with it.
你要不要？
Nyombia? What's that?
你要不要？
Nyobia.
就是说你买不买？
Uh-huh. 20, huh? Okay, okay.
With all of the filming activity and the excitement here, I didn't get much bargaining or lowering the price in, but I bought it and still have that cat in the case today. The prices were so low, you really kind of feel guilty about trying to push them much lower. So just when you see what you like, buy it. Lijiang is several hundred miles of Kunming, the nearest major city, and you can fly there from all different parts of China now. Back in 1997, when we went there, there was only one flight a day, and that was only from Kunming. In fact, the Lijiang airport had just opened 2 years earlier, so things were really kind of quiet and peaceful there. The narrow streets of the old town are laid out in a curving and intersecting way with this flexible layout that it's kind of easy to get lost and disoriented. You can't easily find big landmarks to get your bearings, but that's all part of the fun. It's only about 800 acres in total, so it's not that big an area that you're going to really get lost. So just let loose and go wander and turn whichever way attracts your fancy.
Are you the artist? You're calligrapher? Uh-huh. Shulu. Are you from Lijiang? You live here? Yeah, it's beautiful. Thanks very much.
When you look at how quiet and peaceful the streets were back when this was photographed, it's incredible to imagine how busy and popular it's gotten recently. So tourism is really, really booming, and it can get just too crowded. So if you come here during the busy travel season in the middle of the day, you would easily get caught in a gridlock of tourists, shoulder to shoulder, on these little shopping lanes. Come in the midweek, visit early in the day, late in the afternoon, and try and get around the crowds because it's still a wonderful place to visit. By now you've noticed the hard work and physical labor of the residents of Lijiang. Even the old folks are carrying around big loads of stuff on their backs in those huge backpacks. Well, it's because there's no wheeled vehicles, no cars allowed in the old town, and the streets are kind of bumpy, so it's hard to roll things, I suppose. You got to carry it on your back. For both men and women, it's muscle power, all of which makes good exercise and keeps these old folks healthy. There had been a major earthquake in Lijiang several months before our visit, so they were actively rebuilding. Mostly it affected the new town. Reconstruction was quite fast, and tourist visits continued rapidly increasing. You know, every place in the world is getting more and more tourists as Asians have the money and freedom to travel, as the middle class has more money and more time. You find that tourist towns and attractions all over the world are getting increasingly crowded. And as places get modernized, it's inevitable they're going to lose some of that authenticity, the original character that made them popular in the first place. So that's no reason not to travel. In fact, the opposite. It's a good reason to get out and go as soon as possible. Get off your butt and go visit that place that you've wanted to see. Don't wait much longer. There's no question there's variation from one time of year to the other with crowds and also with the cost of travel. You can save money and have a better time if you're there in the off season, but don't wait. Do it now. It was endlessly fascinating just to wander the little lanes of the old town, observing the buildings, the people, the kids. Just amazing place, place like you've never seen before. And it's all there still waiting for you. Now it has changed, it's modernized, but the essence and heart and soul of the town still survived. Back in '97 when we filmed this, nearly all of the shops were geared for the local residents rather than the tourists. And they had these open-air shops that are workshops. The tailors are at work in these valuable retail spaces, and very little sense of privacy. Even the dentist's office is open to the public viewing from the sidewalk. And the barber shops, you can peer in and observe the work in progress here throughout the town. No privacy. Everything is shared. There's really a small town atmosphere of openness and friendship and casual life here. The restaurants, the families dining at the little table, it's all up and open and freely available to everybody who's walking by. Funky restaurants with local customers. We found no sign of a McDonald's or a Starbucks anywhere. Such a sleepy atmosphere that even some of the shop clerks are taking a nap on the sofa while waiting for a customer. And then we'll take you on a walk through the big outdoor food market. And we'll take you into a couple of typical boutique hotels. There are some casual and inexpensive hotels that you can stay at that are located inside the old town. Don't hesitate to ask to go have a look at the room. That's the best way to evaluate it, and then you can decide if you want to stay or go. They're kind of backpacker crash pads in some ways. Some of the rooms don't have bathrooms. Sometimes it's a group shower, and you have very rustic facilities, but you're going to save a lot of money, and you'll be experiencing the old town night and day. So you might want to consider this kind of accommodations and have a look around, look on the internet, check it out, and you can find some hostels, you can find bed and breakfast type places, and just the rustic hotel. It's really an authentic way of seeing this great old town. Of course, a lot of those are little bed and breakfasts that could be very comfortable, offer you a good accommodation, simple surroundings, and many other more modern hotels that have popped up recently. So take your pick. Kids queued up at the candy store after school like children around the world. Hey. Hi, you. How are you? It's always fun to say hi to the local kids and try and relate to them a little bit, take a few pictures, and hello. Watch as they go marching on by. Hello. It was a little bit rainy this afternoon, and so they've got their umbrellas up, making nice frameworks. It wasn't raining very hard. Out for a walk after the rain can be very pleasant. You know, the streets are washed down, the air is fresh, and it's a great time to take pictures as well, too. The light seems more clear, the air is crisp. Except when the old truck goes by. Hello. We came across a group of falcon enthusiasts. These fellows have got their pet birds and engaging in the sport of falconry. Maybe they're using the birds to go off and do some hunting. And when they're not hunting, the birds are like friendly pets, well taken care of. It's an ancient tradition that goes back 4,000 years in China. Another tradition in the rustic life is burning wood as a fuel for heating or for cooking. Back in '97 when this was filmed, it seemed like most of the restaurants had wood-burning stoves. At that time, we didn't think so much about the air pollution in Chinese cities, but now since the country has become so industrialized, it's certainly become a major issue. All of the restaurants in the old town were really quite simple. Real basic places, generally no menu, no front window, no front wall, sometimes no shop, just out on the sidewalk. And very delicious foods, of course, and so inexpensive. You get a meal there for $1 or $2 for a complete meal. And it was cooked right in front of you, so it was fresh, no worries about your stomach or anything like that. Even the street food, notice they have some butane burners there to keep the foods warm out on the sidewalk. And very little in the way of fancy restaurants in the old town. The cuisine of the Yunnan province is really varied because this region has the largest number of ethnic minority groups in China. So it's hard to make generalizations about the food, but you can say that the most popular dish is noodles. It's crossing the bridge noodles, they call it. A bowl of boiling chicken soup to which you add your own selection of thin meat slices, vegetables, and spices and noodles, much like a hot pot. Some of the kitchens perch their equipment right out over the stream, but they do take care not to pollute this water because they really depend on it for cleaning and drinking and cooking, and you can see the ducks are frolicking around, and so they keep these streams in very good condition. Of course, these ducks are not pets, they eat them. There's a traditional dish called the Lijiang roast duck, crispy skin roast duck similar to Beijing duck, but honey is used to crisp and color the skin. Speaking of food, we're going to take you now on a long walk through the outdoor food market. This is located actually in the newer part of town, just a few blocks away from the old town, and it is a very traditional Chinese food market, as you'll see. There is lots of variety of produce, vegetables, fruits, there's meats, there's clothing, there's hardware and knickknacks, and yet nothing for the tourist. You'll notice as we walk around in this market, there was no tourists here, and there was no souvenirs for sale. It's strictly a local and utilitarian market. We're going to walk you through the market in the new town and show you just how fascinating and interesting it is. And it's really a local scene for the local people. And they're haggling, they're buying their vegetables, they're getting produce and fruits and meats. They're hanging out, they're just passing the time of day, but they're working hard. You see people moving things by muscle power. There's very few motorized vehicles here in the marketplace. Maybe the occasional old ancient truck comes through, but mostly it's people power. They also have some clothing for sale in the marketplace, and here you could certainly get some very good bargains, some very good prices, just picking it right off the rack. Especially when this was photographed, the prices were super low, but even today you can shop and find some very good bargains in the clothing racks at the market. And there's also a covered market adjacent to the outdoor open market. And this is in a long building with a whole series of individual stalls. And you see there's the tailors working with their foot pump sewing machines, custom cutting and making things to order. And here in the covered market, you've got a broader variety of clothing to pick from. Today there are basically two parts of town. There's the new town and the old town. And of course it's the old town that has the main attraction for the visitor. But you'll find some very interesting sights to see in the new town as well. And that's probably where you'll be staying as a visitor because most of the hotels, certainly the newer, more modern hotels, are located in the new town. And you've got a wide variety of restaurants there. happened to be standing outside the university courtyard as the students were getting out of school. And this is an interesting contrast to see the youth of Lijiang. This is the future of the country. They're probably all on their middle of their careers. Maybe they're living in Beijing and Shanghai by now. But we'll hope that some of them are still around in Lijiang helping this town develop. We did see quite a few Tibetan monks walking around in the new town and old town of Lijiang. And that's only natural because the Tibetan population lives throughout parts of southwest China, especially in the Yunnan province. Originally, Tibet covered a much bigger area than the national boundaries do today. Many of the residents are of the minority culture, the Naxi, which is related to the Tibetans. Tibet is not too far away, and this is a really wonderful and exotic group of people, the Naxi people, and they've got their own traditions, their own costumes, their own version of the language. And back in '97 especially, it was predominantly the ethnic minorities living in Lijiang. When UNESCO declared this a World Heritage Site, they provided a description and summary of the history of the area, which I'll partly quote here. There has been a continuous human occupation of this region since the Paleolithic period. But there was the Song dynasties and the Mu family and Azong Aliang and the Yuan Emperor Hubili and many other great characters throughout the thousands of years. But especially in the last 1,000 years, this has been a very important area, as it still is today. Weather conditions are very useful for planning your visit to Lijiang, and the winters are mild and very dry and sunny. You've got a better than 70% chance of sunshine, although December and January are the coldest months and the low would be below freezing overnight. But the daytime average temperature, for example, in January is 43 degrees, so that's comfortable enough for you. And spring begins early and remains dry and sunny until late May. June is the warmest month, but even then the average high temperature is just 75 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's really quite comfortable. We made a day trip out into the countryside, and this was really a nice adventure. We had a chance to mingle with the local tribespeople, another ethnic minority, and do some horseback riding in the river. That was pretty exotic. And had a chance to try and talk with these people, although not much English, but still it's fun communicating and trying anyway.
When you're visiting Lijiang, one of the things that you can do is have a drive into the countryside to Snow Mountain. And along the way, you can stop at this scenic spot and take some pictures with the ethnic minorities in their traditional costumes and ride the horse out into this beautiful river. It's clear blue water from the snow melts of the mountains, and it makes for a really fun outing here in Lijiang in Yunnan province. And you can ride the horse for a few minutes into the river and get your photograph taken with these beautiful ladies. This is a Tibetan costume.
Ride the horse.
Ride the horse, yeah? Uh-huh. You can go out into the river and experience this beautiful spot, take your pictures, and with this scenic, majestic mountain backdrop right outside of Lijiang in Yunnan province. And everybody's very happy. It's a fun day. Very nice. Thank you.
Okay.
谢谢.
谢谢.
Continuing along on our private bus tour, we stop at a visitor center for a beautiful view of Jade Dragon Snow Mountain. It's got the southernmost glacier in the northern hemisphere. It's a beautiful sight. And then we carry on to a lamasery. And there's a monastery on our itinerary. We had a chance to drop in and have a look around this historical building and meet several of the monks in residence and several of the other workers there. So this was a nice touch as well. This Jade Peak Monastery sits at the foot of Yulong Snow Mountain and was established back in 1756. It's actually a lamasery, and it's most famous for its beautiful gardens and camellia tree. Naturally, they have a gift shop, and so the ladies were most interested to see what kind of authentic jewelry and other knickknacks and artifacts might be available. It was a special opportunity to meet and greet the head monk who was presiding over the temple this day, a very friendly fellow. And then we're moving along on this busy afternoon, our small group heading back to the bus. As part of our excursion out to Jade Mountain area, we stopped in this other village. It's not nearly as famous or historic or as attractive as Lijiang, but it was so fascinating in itself. Even fewer tourists, fewer development here. You've got oxen and animals walking right down the main lane of town, and no paving, and very rustic situation here, really old-fashioned wooden buildings, and the local Naxi culture with people, locals who really don't speak any English. So good luck communicating, but it's really fun to see. The Naxi ethnic minority has a population of just over 300,000 people scattered mostly throughout Yunnan and particularly in the Lijiang district. They are farmers primarily, and of course now they're adapting somewhat to the tourist trade, but in a small village like this, it seems like the livelihood is 99% farming. They're leading a fairly simple life, something like people lived in the 19th century, it looks like. We felt very privileged to be witness to this and to be allowed into their home and to see how they live and share a little bit of time with them. The chief crops of the region are rice and maize, wheat, potatoes, bean, hemp, and cotton. So these people are somewhat self-sufficient in their foods. And of course, like kids everywhere, they're out playing in the schoolyard. The little boys are kicking the soccer ball around naturally, and the girls are doing somewhat more peaceful activities, jumping rope and having fun together. And now we're going to share with you a traditional music and dance performance in Lijiang. And just to illustrate how quiet and really empty of tourists the town was, it was rather amazing this evening. I purchased the ticket from one of the dancers in the town during the day. She's out in the street selling her tickets to the show. And I show up that evening for the performance, and I was the only one in the audience. It was in a small assembly hall, and so I offered to just cancel the night. I didn't expect them all to perform for me, but they insisted. So the orchestra and the dancers performed for me and the camera, and now for you. While watching this beautiful performance, I'll include a few more scenes of Lijiang.